Here are some facts about me. My father constantly criticized and despised me. I loved my wife, but sometimes we were on the verge of. My depression is called Black Dog. Many people died because of me. All facts are truth. I am Winston Churchill, British Prime Minister during World War II, known for my leadership, speeches, and resilience in the face of adversity. I am ashamed of some things, and some things almost destroyed me. However, it is an integral part of my life. It proves that famous people have the same problems and life challenges as everyone else. Now all about it in more detail. Section 1. My father constantly criticized and despised me. My father. Randolph, they called him. Lord Randolph Churchill, a man whose name echoed through the chambers of power and politics, and yet, whose voice could never quite reach the soul of his own son. The great and mighty Lord, he who was so revered by all, save for his own blood. For my father was a distant figure, a pillar of grandeur, yes, but one so far removed from the warmth of home, from the tender regard of a father who would raise his son in affection and care. He was a politician, a lion in the halls of Westminster, but at home, he was cold. A man too busy to see his child's heart. I remember, as a boy, standing at the door of his study, gazing in, hoping, yearning, for a word, for a glance. But it was never to be. For him, I was but a shadow in the corner of his busy life, a mere spectator to his ambition and his career. He, the grand lord, always the critic, always the judge of my worth, never once showing the affection that a son so deeply longs for. No approval, no encouragement. Just silence, and the sting of his criticism. How those words cut, though he spoke them in measured tones, with the cold precision of one who could not, would not, see the pain he caused. And oh, how it weighed upon me. I, a child of promise, a child who sought to prove himself, who longed for nothing more than his father's praise. But no, he turned away, his back to me as I reached out, time and time again, only to be met with disappointment. It is said that every boy needs a father's guidance to become a man. But what am I to become when the father is but a shadow in my life, a distant figure upon a pedestal I could never climb? Then came that fateful day, he was taken from me, just as I was beginning to learn the taste of his harshness. The cruel irony. In the cruelest of ways, my chance at redemption was stolen from me. A man, so full of fire, so full of ambition, and yet, so absent. Gone in an instant. At the tender age of 20, I found myself standing at the precipice of life, without the one man whose approval I had so desperately sought. And with him, he took my hope that one day, perhaps, I could earn his love, his respect. But alas, that was not to be. What remains is the void. A cavernous emptiness where his shadow once stood. The anger, the regret, the deep ache of unspoken words, they linger, like ghosts, in the corners of my mind. And what a fool I was to believe that his death would grant me peace. No, it only brought me an unresolved wound, a scar that I would carry for years, perhaps for all of my days. For in this world, as in all things, there is no true closure. There is no finality when the heart is left unhealed. I rose, as you may know. I became something. A leader, a figure of strength, of resolve. But know this, every step I took, every victory I claimed, was shadowed by the memory of that man who, despite his greatness, never saw me as his equal, never believed in me as I believed in him. And so, I strive, not for his approval, but for something more profound, more personal. I strive, at last, to prove to myself that I am not defined by his silence, nor by the lack of a father's love. And yet, I will always be his son. And the son will always long for the love of his father. A complicated tale, isn't it? A tale of ambition, of frustration, of an aching heart. And yet, I ask you, what man, in his quest to rise, has not borne the weight of such grief? Perhaps this is the price of greatness, my friends. To be both blessed and cursed by the absence of the one who should have shown you the way. To fight the shadows of the past, and to carry them with you, even as you step into the light. But there is still a fire inside me. And that fire will burn bright, for all the world to see. It burns in defiance of the cold silence I once knew. I shall not be defeated by the ghosts of my past, no, I will move forward. For I am Winston Churchill, and my name shall echo not in the halls of despair, but in the corridors of triumph. And perhaps, somewhere, in the vastness of time, my father's voice shall finally speak the words I long to hear. But that, I fear, is a wish that shall remain unfulfilled. For he is gone. And I am left to carry on. But I shall carry on, for that is what I was born to do. Section 2. I loved my wife, but sometimes we were on the verge of. Ah, Clementine, my dear Clementine. How often I have thought of her, in the quiet of my solitude, in the throes of battle, in the moments of victory and defeat. A love, yes, a love so deep, so true, that it filled the very chambers of my heart. Yet, I am a man of ambition, a man whose mind races with 1,000 thoughts, whose soul is consumed with the call of duty. And therein lies the tragedy, you see, for in my heart, I am devoted to her, oh, how deeply, but in my mind, I am often elsewhere. I would return from the toils of politics and war, from the trenches of discourse and the battlefields of history, only to find that I had been gone too long. Too long for her to bear, too long for her heart to remain whole. My obsession with the duties of this nation, of my calling, left her in the shadow of my ambitions. And I, how I wish I could undo it, left her to bear the weight of my absence. It was never intentional, never cruel, but it was a neglect that wore on her, slowly, inexorably, like the erosion of a once strong stone beneath the relentless tide. There were moments, how they haunt me now, when I saw her eyes, tired and drawn, as she tried to understand. What could she understand of the ceaseless pressure that gripped my every thought? What could she know of the urgency of a nation's need, of the weight of history that I carried upon my shoulders? And yet, in those same moments, I failed her. She, with her quiet grace, her gentle wisdom, was left to contend with a man who could not see beyond his own obsession with the world's affairs. I could not see her pain, and I, oh, how I regretted, left her to suffer in silence. I would return, yes, but I was not truly there. Not as a husband, not as a partner. For the work never stopped. The speeches, the letters, the decisions, oh, they consumed me. And Clementine, she was so patient, so enduring. She weathered the storms of my ambition, of my political battles, and she did so with a strength that, I admit, I failed to truly comprehend. How could I? How could I, when my mind was always elsewhere, always striving for the next victory, the next challenge? And yet, beneath it all, there was love. Tremendous, unwavering love. She was my rock, my anchor in a sea of uncertainty. Even when I was lost in the chaos of my duties, she remained steady, a constant presence in my life. There were times when she would speak of her own hardships, her loneliness, but I, fool that I was, could not see the extent of her sacrifice. She would tell me, "Winston, you must live for us as well as for the country." Oh, how I wish I had listened more closely, how I wish I had understood. But love is a strange thing. It endures, even in the darkest of times. Though I failed her, though I left her to struggle alone, she never ceased to stand by me. And I, in turn, came to see the depth of her loyalty. In my later years, I understood it. Oh, how I understood it. She never asked for glory, never demanded attention. All she asked was for my presence, my care, and I was too blind to give it in the moments that mattered most. Clementine, my beloved, the woman who stood by me through war and peace, who held my hand through triumph and tragedy. How could I ever repay her for her love, her steadfastness? For her resilience in the face of my neglect? I know not, for how can one repay such devotion? The years have passed, and I stand here, reflecting upon the faults of a man who loved, but failed to give all that was required. What is a man without his family, without the heart of his home? A man who conquers the world, but loses the one he holds dearest? A man who wins the battle of nations, but loses the battle of love? In the end, all that remains is the quiet acknowledgement of what might have been, of what was lost in the pursuit of something greater. The world will remember me for my victories, for my leadership in the war, for my speeches. But Clementine, she will always be my greatest victory, the one who loved me through my darkest hours. And for her, I am eternally grateful. I only wish I could have been the husband she deserved, a husband who could be there, truly be there, when she needed me most. Ah, but life is not kind to those who wish to divide their hearts. In my mind, I am one thing, determined, resolute, and unwavering. But in my heart, in my heart, I am both a conqueror and a fool. Section 3, my depression is called Black Dog. Ah, yes. The black dog. He pauses, his gaze distant, almost as though he sees it, lurking just out of view, its shadow creeping around the edges of his thoughts. It follows me, you see. It has no name, no shape, no clear form, but it knows me. It knows me better than I would wish. It comes upon me at the most inopportune of times. When I stand before crowds, when I must give my speeches, when the fate of nations hangs on my words, and there, in the pit of my stomach, it begins. A coldness. A heaviness. A weight so unbearable, it is as though I am trudging through thick mud, dragging the very soul of me through the muck. I have fought battles before, but this is my most insidious foe. I have often described it as a black dog. You know, the world sees the image of the mighty Churchill, the bulldog, the unshakable leader, the man who rallied the world to fight against tyranny. I have stood at the front lines of history, my chest swelling with pride as I faced down the might of fascism, as I stood against the darkness of war. But few knew of the shadow I carried with me. Few knew of the darkness that whispered in my ear during the silence of the night. I have stood on the precipice of despair, my hands shaking, my heart racing. The black dog, it comes at me with its cold claws and breath, gnawing at the edges of my thoughts. It tells me that I am not enough, that my efforts are futile, that all of this great struggle, will be in vain. It tells me that I am no leader, no hero. That I am a failure. And in those moments, my friends, I cannot escape it. It roams the halls of my mind. It is the voice that says, "You are weak." It is the shadow that makes me question whether my resolve is a mere facade. It is the weight that makes me wonder, just for a fleeting moment, if the fight is worth it. He takes a slow, steadying breath, his voice a little softer now, tinged with a sorrow that only those who have battled the same beast can truly understand. You see, my struggles with this wretched companion, were not known to many. No, how could they be? I am the man who led a nation through war, the man who stood as a beacon in the fog. I had to be strong. I had to be the pillar, the unshakable force for the people. But in those lonely, quiet hours, when I was alone with my thoughts, the black dog would sit at my side. And there, in the dark, it would tear at me, tear at my confidence, tear at my will. It would whisper to me that I was not fit for my role, not worthy of my position. A man like me, is not supposed to struggle with such things. The world expects me to be strong, to bear the weight of nations. But who bears the weight of the man who must bear it all? I would rise each day, each time, with the same tenacity that carried me through battlefields. But some days, it was a struggle just to rise. It was a battle before the battle even began. And in those moments, I would look out of my window, perhaps at the smoldering remains of a city, or the storm-tossed sea, and think, how can I lead when I feel so lost? How can I stand tall when all I want to do is collapse? But I did not collapse. No, I did not. I fought. I fought for the people, for the cause. But it was a fight that few could see, a war that waged quietly, inside my own mind. It was a war of wills, and let me tell you, there were days I was not sure if mine would win. He pauses again, and a flicker of something resembling regret, or perhaps understanding, crosses his face. I do not speak of this often, you know. There is shame in it, perhaps, for the man who must lead his people through such darkness. We, who carry the weight of the world, are expected to walk with unwavering steps. But I say this now, not as an excuse, but as a truth. The black dog, it has followed many of us. It has followed kings and queens, soldiers and statesmen. It is the shadow that darkens even the brightest of days. And yet, I endured. Through all the darkness, through all the doubt, I endured. For every day the black dog visited, there was a day that followed, when I would rise, shake off the shadow, and carry on. For I am Winston Churchill. I am the man who, even in the face of my own demons, stood before the storm and dared to say, I will not bow. And in that, perhaps, there lies the strength. He looks out, as if seeing something far off in the distance, something beyond the stage, beyond the years of struggle and triumph. So when you speak of me, remember this, not just the victories, not just the speeches, not just the victories over foreign foes, but also the quiet battles, the ones fought in the silence, the ones fought in the heart. For even the strongest among us, even the mightiest bulldogs, must contend with their own black dogs. Section 4, Many people died because of me. Ah, Gallipoli. The name itself is enough to cause one's heart to tighten, to stir the demons that lie dormant in the corners of one's soul. He straightens, his shoulders stiffening under the weight of memory. I was, as you know, the First Lord of the Admiralty. A man of vision, a man of ambition, eager to carry our cause forward with the swiftness of the wind and the precision of a masterful chess player. We had a plan, you see. A bold, daring plan. One that would strike at the very heart of the Ottoman Empire, that would open a new front in the war, and bring our gallant allies, those brave men of the French and the Anzacs, into the fray. The Dardanelles, it would be the key to victory, the key to a quicker end to this terrible war. He clenches his fist at his side, the memory of his zeal turning to something else, something darker. But as with all things that seem so certain, so full of promise, reality does not always play as we hope. No, the plan faltered. The ships, the men, the strategy, all fell into disarray. The Dardanelles, that narrow strait, became a death trap rather than a pathway to victory. We underestimated the enemy, we overestimated our own strength, and we underestimated the cost of human life. He pauses, his gaze steady, but distant. A flicker of grief crosses his face, before he steers himself back to the task at hand. Oh, how I defended it then! How I insisted that our resolve, our courage, would see us through. But as the weeks wore on, the bodies piled up. Young men, brave men, my men, sent to their deaths in the name of a cause that was slipping through our fingers. And I, as always, stood at the helm, shoulders broad, mouth firm, doing what I must to preserve the image of victory. But victory was slipping away. How often I have wondered whether the cost was worth the price. He takes a breath, his expression hardening, his voice becoming more forceful. I stood firm then, yes. The critics were many, but they were only words. I had the heart of a lion, and I believed in the righteousness of our mission. But in the end, it was not words that defeated us. It was the unforgiving tide of fate. The campaign failed. The loss of life, the suffering, the blood, oh, the blood. It stained my hands, though I had not wielded the sword. He looks down, a flicker of pain softening the otherwise resolute line of his mouth. And so I resigned. A man must take responsibility when the fruit of his labor is poisoned. It was a humbling experience, to be sure. I had risen with such vigor, such passion. Yet, before me, the ruins of my ambition lay in the sand, burned by the fire of failure. He clenches his fist again, but this time it is a fist of defiance, not of sorrow. You may ask me, was I ashamed? And I shall answer with the full weight of a man who knows the consequences of his actions, yes, I was ashamed. Ashamed not just of the failure, but of the lives lost, the families broken, the future uncertain. Ashamed that a man, no matter his ambition, cannot control the very tides of war. Ashamed that my vision for a swift victory, had led to suffering so great it makes even my most profound triumphs seem insignificant. He shakes his head, the gravity of it all sinking in again, and yet, despite the pain, he speaks on. But I say this to you, no man stands forever in the shadow of his mistakes. No, I do not hide from this chapter, for it is mine, as much as the victories I have earned. And perhaps in the ashes of Gallipoli, I found the man I truly was. A man capable of making mistakes, capable of learning, capable of rising again. Yes, the failure followed me like a shadow for many years. But I rose. And I carried on, as we all must, for what is the purpose of life if not to rise again when we have fallen? He looks out to the audience, a slight smile pulling at the corners of his mouth. And so, I do not look upon Gallipoli with shame alone. I look upon it as a lesson taught by hardship, by loss. It is a reminder that no man, no matter how great, can claim perfection. We all stumble. We all falter. But in our faltering, we find the strength to walk once more, and perhaps, even to run. He nods solemnly, as if coming to terms with his own history, before stepping back. The lights dim slightly, and the room is left in reflection, haunted by the words of a man who would forever be marked by both triumph and failure in the annals of history.